Hello, everybody, and good morning, and welcome again. And nice to see so many faces here inside for my last talk. Yeah, time is running. Yeah, so I'm back again after spending 5 days at the 100th anniversary celebration of the US social mission in Los Angeles, and after 5 days of session. So a few weeks have passed since my last talk. Last time I ended with the observation that practice our own emptiness is the precondition for the 4 bodhisattva actions. I would say that our emptiness is the practice to clear our mind to act like a bodhisattva more and more, or to become mature bodhisattvas acting in the world. This all is based on our experiences in our Zazen practice and supported by the framework that develops out of our Dharma studies. Today I would like to devote special attention to the third embracing bodhisattva action, beneficial action. Nowadays, this often goes hand in hand with the term engaged Buddhism, and it has taken many different forms. Isan Dorsey, Zen priest and former drag queen, who opened the first AIDS hospice in San Francisco around the 1990s, and whose life is described very impressively in the book Street Zen, once said in response to a question about what he had to say about engaged Buddhism, "I don't know anything about it. When someone is down on the floor, I help them up." This view had carried me along from the beginning. It has encouraged me to act from this intention. There is this koan about Joshu Chushin. His Chinese name is Joju Jungchen. He lived in China in the 8th and 9th century, and we heard a lot about him in the Gentoo-is, especially in the last one. His koans in the Blue Cliff records and in the Mumen koans among the most famous koans. I'm sure you all know the one about whether a dog has Buddha nature or not. He is featured in the following koan. One day, Joshu fell down in the snow. The snow has man high so that he could not see him anymore, and he called out, "Help me up, help me up." A monk came by and lay down beside him and also dug himself completely into the snow. Joshu got up and went away. It took me some time to understand what this koan wants to tell me and why I got stuck in this koan in particular. Like many koan, perhaps all koans, it's about relationships and the interdependent origination. At some point, I realized that the action of helping in this koan is about the space that the monk shares with Joshu, and the fact that Joshu managed to come out of the snow by himself. In a mundane way of seeing the world, it is very strange to express compassion for someone like this. When we start caring about others, we always must be careful that we don't get stuck in our ideas about the world. We must be careful not to give into some form of activism that might be currently be en vogue. Reflecting on this topic and one's own intention seems to be very important in my point of view. Any form of activism shapes our practice into a political action that arises purely out of our discursive attitude in our mind. Quite often, it only shows how big our ego-centeredness is. Like I said in my last talk, Dogen says in the Mountain and Water Sutra that we must unhook our ideas. That is, take them off of the hook of ourself. We must always subject these ideas to deep investigation. We must also trace their sources, find out where they come from, and most importantly, whom they benefit in the end. We must not allow ourselves to be taken in by political agendas just because they are fashionable and in line with the spirit of the times. We must never forget our vows. These vows are about helping people to free themselves from suffering, always without any political agendas and ideologies. In fact, our whole practice is always about realizing the true reality. We can only sense this level of reality in our direct actions. That is in our direct environment, in our direct relationships with everyone and everything. It is in direct action and not in our ideas about action that this is witnessed. Our ideas about it are all just fiction, delusions. There is this story I found in an old edition of Opening the Hand of Thought in the Q&A part that is now missing. A student asked Uchiyama Roshi a question, and he is talking about his teacher, François Vialet. Hojo-san told me that he knows Vialet. He was an Austrian-French person with a PhD in philosophy, and he was the first European in Antaichi who got the transmission from Uchiyama Roshi. He translated Jinsai Ryori no Hon, How to Cook Your Life, into German. And last year, my Sangha in Vienna read it and compared it with the English translation by Thomas Wright. And it was really interesting to see the different styles and how the cultural background created two different books. Vialet was a friend from Delard de Chardin. He was a French Jesuit, anthropologist and philosopher who wrote many books and was very well known. Vialet made a great effort to create a dialogue between Christianity and Zen. His strong Christian influence can be clearly felt in the translation. Anyway, his student was in Antaichi and asked the following question to Uchiyama. During a Dharma talk lecture several years ago in France, Reverend Vialet, who later became your disciple, presented this sort of koan to our group. A communist went to the master and said, "I can't practice because the ideological differences are too strong." The master replied, "Well, I'm a communist too." Then a fascist went before the master saying that he couldn't practice Zazen either, for the same reason. The master gave the same reply, "I'm a fascist too." To other people's comments, the master replied in the same way, "I'm that too." Then one day, when all these people happened to be talking among themselves, they realized that they had been tricked by the master. They were furious and finally decided to arm themselves and go to teach the master a lesson. When the master saw them coming, he shouted, "Zazen!" And they all fall down in faint. So I will shorten the story to the points that are important for us here. Uchiyama Roshi answered, "I can hold a cup and say it is red. But from that side of the table, you might be able to see only white. It's really just a matter of how you look at things. The communists fight with the fascists saying red, while the fascists on the other side say white. Actually, so it is neither one. The cup is just what it is. I am the reality I am, and you are the reality that you are. Now, when reality settles on itself, that is what we call the reality of life. Sitting, returning to the reality of what only truly is Zazen. In other words, philosophies and ideologies are nothing but singular ways of looking at the world. When you look from some angle, it is only natural that everyone's view will be different. As long as people look at things from an angle, there is always going to be conflict. It will never end. The idea of putting an end to looking at life from some angle appears in the Sutta Nipata, in the words of Shakyamuni. When everyone's running around shouting that he is the one speaking the truth, what else is there to do but to tell everyone to shut up and sit down? What is most essential is that each person returns to the reality of his or her own life and sits within, not without, within that reality. It just makes sense to live in this way. There is certainly nothing wrong with people in the world quieting down a little bit. Doing Zazen means just that, to let go of all viewpoints and return to the reality of life. That is what Uchiyama Roshi says. And what is this reality of life? The basis of our action as bodhisattvas is the effort to eliminate suffering, or at least to alleviate it. The methods we use as bodhisattvas arise directly in the moment and are based on our own practical experience, and in the case of chaplains, also on the experience of our training. However, our methods and skill must be related to the respective moment, that which we experience right here and now. And of course, we need to train our skills and acquire basic knowledge. But the implementation of this knowledge is only true or real if it is in harmony with the respective moment and whatever it is the moment calls for. The concept of cause and condition and mutual independence clearly shows that we only know what the situation really requires right in the moment of action. These days, we express our opinions far too quickly and too often on social media, judging and commenting situations and things with just a few words or simply with emojis. We do this based on our ideas, of which we don't know how they have been generated over the years, even over generations. We don't know how they came about and where their roots are, who brought them into the world, and above all, whom they benefit in the end. We find things good or bad within a few seconds and spread this opinion on the internet, send it out to the world, instead of witnessing our bodhisattva vows in our real life, in the moment, in face-to-face reality. May I be a protector to the defenseless, a guide for those who have set out on their journey, for those who want to cross the water to the other shore. May I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. This is from the Way of the Bodhisattvas from Shantideva. Shantideva was a king's son from southern India, who lived in the first half of the 8th century and became a monk in a large monastery called Nalanda. He was and is very important in the Tibetan tradition. He wrote the Bodhicharyavatara, which translated to the entry into the path of enlightenment or also bliss. Pema Chodron translated it as the path of the Bodhisattvas. And she wrote a wonderful book called No Time to Lose, with commentaries on this classic text. In the book, Pema gives a lot of advice and guidance on how we should deal with the kleshas, those ungraspable energies I talked about. She talks about living in klesha addiction and therefore having to treat them as such, and the healing power of self-reflection, and that we must not ignore our emotions, but look closely at them. We also have to look closely at the feelings of shame and guilt that are so important in our Western culture. From my point of view, guilt and shame are seen differently in the Eastern culture, like I mentioned in one of my previous talks. Those two emotions were quickly led to self-doubt and, by extension, self-hatred and self-destructions. This is not destruction of the self, which would be considered very positive in the sense. No, it is about the destructive form that only produces self-hatred and transforms nothing, but only uproots us and cuts us off from our source. As I discussed in my third lecture, the way to deal with emotions in Zen is not so direct. We put everything into our Zazen and its slow transformation effect. Energy practices like yoga and Naidan, which I also discussed in the third lecture, can help a lot. After Shantideva, another bodhisattva became important for me very quickly, namely Vimalakirti. I think mainly because he was able to realize lay life so deeply with his bodhisattva existence, and that was very instructive and helpful for me. In addition, he was a merchant, entrepreneur, and much more. Everyone, no matter their status, respected him very much. The Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra was written almost 2000 years ago and is also called the Sutra of Unimaginable Salvation. It addresses important questions such as what is a bodhisattva? How does he or she act? As is often the case in the sutras, it begins with supernatural actions by the Buddha. He is given umbrellas by many visitors and unites them into a single great umbrella that spans all the galaxies and is then asked how one can attain the purity of the Buddha land. The Buddha replies that the Buddha land of the Bodhisattva lies within each individual being. If the Bodhisattva wish to attain the pure land, they must purify the heart and mind. And when the heart and mind are purified, the Buddha land also becomes pure. Shariputra then wonders if the Buddha's heart was impure, since this world is so impure. The Buddha recognized this thought and replies that in reality, the world is always pure. But beings cannot see this purity because of their spiritual delusion. Because Shariputra still cannot believe this, the Buddha shows him the purity of the world. After this miracle, desire from supreme enlightenment arises in many of those present, or they attain various stages of realization. Then Vimalakirti enters the story, and people learn that he is a layperson living with a wife and children and doing business, perfuming himself and putting on jewelry. But his actions show that he is a true bodhisattva, and he uses many skillful means, upaya, to work for the benefit of all living beings. He even went into Brussels, where he pointed out the ruin of access to people and helped people to get away from alcohol. As a skillful means, he also gets sick, and thousands of people visit him, and he tells them about the shortcomings of the body, encourages everyone to always seek the body of the Tathagata. By the way, Ruben Rosenblum, my first teacher, was very often sick for a while, and he whined out to Shunryu Suzuki that it was getting on his nerves. And Shunryu Suzuki only replied, "A good monk is always sick." At some point, Vimalakirti wonders why the Buddha does not send anyone to visit him when he is sick. Buddha recognized this thought due to his supernatural powers and then asked his disciples to go to Vimalakirti. One by one, they refused to do so because they have already had an encounter with Vimalakirti and were ashamed to realize that Vimalakirti's enlightenment is so outstanding, more outstanding than their own, that they were all ashamed. Disciple after disciple tells stories about why he can't go to Vimalakirti. In telling the stories of their previous encounters, which one with Vimalakirti, the whole Mahayana teaching is offered about meditation, suchness, and how through his speeches hundreds of lay people always reach the highest enlightenment. Finally, since no one wants to go, Manjushri goes. He is ready to face Vimalakirti, and everybody comes along because they know what a great and wonderful Dharma teaching will be offered when Manjushri and Vimalakirti come together. And that's where the sutta really begins. We are in chapter 5 of 14 and onward. Due to his supernatural power, Vimalakirti knew immediately that Manjushri was on his way. And he cleared out his room, also with his supernatural powers. Only the sick bed remained, and he went to bed and pretended to be sick. Welcome, Manjushri. You come here as if you were not one who comes, and you see as if you don't see. Manjushri replied, Lord, what you say is right. If a man has already come, he does not come. And if he has gone, he does not go. And why? For a man who comes, there is no place from where he comes. And for one who goes, there is no place to where he goes. Nagarjuna sends his regards here. And Father Vimalakirti states, foolishness arises from desire, and that is the cause of my sickness. Because all beings are sick, I'm also sick. When they will be cured, I will also be cured. The conversation goes on like this for a very long time. The two protagonists talk about many things, but especially about the teachings of non-duality, connectedness, and in the 10th chapter, the conversation is over. After this teaching on entering the doctrine of non-duality, all 5,000 assembled bodhisattvas entered the doctrine of non-duality and attained the patient acceptance of the non-existing of all dharmas. Then, of course, Vimalakirti goes on and reveals thoughts of the other bodhisattvas who are still there and teaches them. For this, Vimalakirti puts himself in samadhi state, and with the help of his supernatural powers, he revealed before the great assembly a land called Sarva Sugandha, which one can reach if one passes through all the Buddha lands in the upper worlds. And he continues in the teachings about the 6 paramitas. What a funny coincidence that Hoku talked about them last week. The 6 paramitas, or the 6 virtues, can be very helpful in our liberation, and paramita literally means reaching the other shore, that is realizing the truth. The 6 paramitas are giving or generosity, discipline or vow, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, many other teachings on how to act as a bodhisattva follow. And it ends with praises and handing over the sutra, which is named Unimaginable Liberation. For me, these are the prerequisites for committed Buddhism. This is our basis. We should not get excited about political ideas or get pulled in this direction. Our actions are not for a special class or elite only. Our action must be inclusive of all beings. But they must be balanced with wisdom and compassion, so that we leave no one behind. When we exclude anybody, separate or divide the world into good and evil, we are not fulfilling our bodhisattva duties. We must be aware and let go of everything, even if we believe we are on the right side. Who knows which side is right? We open our hearts and broaden our perspectives, also and especially on what we do not like. This is what leaving the household means, in my point of view. Beneficial action manifests in many small things, not in the big things. A bodhisattva should not be visible, says Vimalakirti. He is like Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 hands, one hand for every occasion where help is needed. It is like reaching for the pillow in the night. This is our bodhisattva idol, and the vows we always chant after the talk give us the framework. Living by vow and not by karma is an important quote in our lineage, and I will tell you more about karma in a few minutes. I work mostly in prisons. It is an idle field of practice. It constantly helps me to break down my inner walls, to open my heart and expand my habitual perspectives. The German word Seelsorge has many possible translations or meanings in English. Counseling, chaplaincy, pastoral care, ministry, spiritual care, contemplative care. The variety of terms shows how important this all is here in the US. And things are very different in Europe or in Austria and Germany in particular, but I try to open this field and support the development of Buddhist chaplaincy work in general with all other Buddhist traditions. Koryo from our Viennese Sangha and I are now members of the work group for chaplaincy of the German Buddhist Union, and we spent the last few years translating the important book, The Arts of Contemplative Care, into German, and it was released a few weeks ago. In the Japanese Soto Zen practice, the focus is mostly on the monastic practice, and for sure this is very important, but also there are more and more attempts to develop this field of chaplaincy, and Hosen Allen Sinoki, who has done great bodhisattva work, brought me in contact with a Japanese chaplain who will build an international chaplaincy network. If you take a look at the organizational chart of the Sotoshu, you have to look for a long time until you find a small department for prison chaplaincy. This characteristics is certainly also a Western phenomenon that has a lot to do with the Judeo-Christian religions and the interpretation of mercy, and how this interpretation has developed in the time of industrialization, when the state slowly started to take over the tasks of caring that were formerly performed by the church. As far as I know, and I don't know much, social support is organized differently in Asian societies. This is an exciting field for social studies, and hopefully some academics will explore this field more. But I will focus now on the practical level and right now, and not get lost in these institutional and organizational examples. But I think it is very important to think about the framework for our bodhisattva actions and how we bring this into the world for the benefit of the society. And it is time to bring the merit or the fruits of our practice to other beings on different levels. And I can see this happens more and more. The starting point of our actions as chaplains is always our own Buddhist practice. Or in other words, our action should arise from sharing our practice. It is the role of a spiritual guide to help to alleviate suffering and support inner liberation. This role can take many different forms depending on what is needed and at any given moment. Meditation together, entering silence as the most direct practice, is certainly our most important practice. Also lecturing, and especially to be an example, are often forgotten virtues. It is also very much about active listening, as I have described, and often also simply about giving time. In short, about giving. Dana, as we know, is the first of the four embracing bodhisattva actions. This practice is primarily about ourselves, about being present in the present moment, and about the possibility to find transformation and to open our heart right here and now, and to experience the interconnectedness in this very moment and pass it on. We practice empathizing with the emerging of our own being, mostly in everyday situations, and thereby develop more understanding for ourselves and our surroundings, and recognize the threats of relationship, which is nothing other than interconnectedness. The basic question of our action should always be, what makes me do this? Why I'm doing this? Exploring this question should become one of the most important practices of our practice in pastoral care. As we seek to clarify these questions, we assist ourselves to resolving our karmic entanglements. Those explorations can also help us to break down our own walls, to dissolve our inherent separateness bit by bit, and to move toward the ideal of being a bodhisattva and being in connection with ourselves and our world. Feeling this connection from moment to moment opens healing spaces for ourselves and others. These questions help us to develop compassion for ourselves and thus open our hearts to ourselves. And in this understanding of ourselves, we also open to others and show them compassion. And as we know, developing compassion is one of the great goals of our practice. In our daily pastoral life, this means that from the felt practical experience of the interdependent nature of everything, we learn that we also or primarily help ourselves by supporting others. In the Lotus Sutra, chapter 25, it is said, the amount of auspicious giving is immeasurable like the sea. In this form of sharing practice, all four bodhisattva actions can be practiced and realized. In various ways, the action of giving is also always accompanied by loving words. Out of this, beneficial action arises, and without identity action, we cannot meet anyone right where they are. We always miss them. I will tell you a bit more about how I use this field as a practice container in the new essay book of our Sangha. It will be presented next week, Saturday at the Platinum event. When we are asked what we do, the most important answer is, we don't give advice, we give space. Like I said in the beginning when I told you about Joshu in the snow. Another important requirement is reflection, which takes the form of self-reflection, supervision, and intervision. In addition, the willingness to engage in dialogue is necessary. The premise is the second of the four bodhisattva actions, loving words and listening. In order to be able to do this, we need training also in communicative behaviors, such as insight dialogue created by Gregory Kramer, or the dialogue school of David Bohm, or nonviolent communication created by Marshall Rosenberg. To have some training in these methods is an advantage. My wife, Kogyo Sabine, my Dharma sister, Koryo Susan, and I developed our own practice form based on these methods. We call it connectedness practice. In German, Verbundenheitspraxis. And to teach this is part of our project 1000 Hands. No matter what we do, it is important not to forget that we have to be called or asked for help. We do not missionaries. And we have to protect ourselves from thinking we are good people and changing the world. We never know how our action will affect us, which karmic entanglements they will encounter, no matter how good our intentions are. I know of several stories that illustrate this, where good intentions have generated tremendous evil. We must be very clear on our intention like Dogen says in the fascicle Shishubo. I would like to share a story with you that did not have quite such a dramatic effect, but still ended very tragically. I'm not sure if everyone here can handle these tragic details, hence this trigger warning, and this warning is especially for myself. Once, at the beginning of my practice and chaplaincy work, I visited a client of mine from my business company, and she was just devastated and told me about her suffering with her daughter and asked me to help her. The daughter was heavily addicted to drugs, heroin, and all kinds of other chemical drugs. Several rehab attempts has failed over and over again. I promised nothing except that I would like to visit her at home. I did so and immediately connected with her daughter, who had just turned 20 at the time. We understood each other right away, and she quickly involved me in her drama. During her first visit to a club, when she had just turned 13, she was seduced into ecstasy and was raped in a drug frenzy. That was the beginning of her addiction and her isolation, inwardly and outwardly. She had a great spiritual nature, and we decided to spend time together. We practiced meditation, or rather breathing exercises together, went for walks to the cinema and museums. I made this deal with her. The longer she stayed sober, the more time I spent with her, and it worked. More and more, her isolation also dissolved. She met a young man in school, they fell in love, and she went to rehab, which she finished this time and came home completely clean. She did start to drink more alcohol with this young man, like young people used to, but as far as I could tell, not to excess. I was very happy about the development and ended the mentorship. 5 years later, her mother closed her business and was therefore no longer a customer. But one day she called me and told me that her daughter now lived in Munich, about 350 miles away from my home, and she was a heavy alcoholic and was again completely lonely. I called her daughter, and she was very sorry and told me that she had often thought about contacting me, but somehow she was too ashamed because she was devastated again. We started talking on the phone regularly, and when I was close to Munich, we also met in person. She was much more desperate this time, and it was very hard to get her out of her depressive state. We had a lot of dramatic phone calls. Finally, she decided to go to rehab again, but she broke off after a few weeks. She begged me to take her in, but of course, I couldn't, because I couldn't provide the environment she needed in my home. I was able to get her to go back to rehab on the condition that I would take her there, and I did. I will never forget the last glimpse into her eyes. Her eyes were blue-green, and when she was happy, they sparkled. But this time it was the opposite. She met a young man in the institution who was there on heroin rehab. She fell in love, and they both quit therapy and ran away. She contacted me and said she was clean and everything would be fine with her new boyfriend. 6 months later, her mother called me and told me she had died last night of a heroin overdose, together with her new boyfriend. This was Laura's story. I will tell you a second one, but there are many more. The young man with whom I had the awakening listening experience also asked me to take him in, so that we could practice together, but of course that didn't work either. A few years after the listening experience, he died in a drug frenzy. He choked on a piece of pizza and died miserably. In my pastoral career, I have lost many people. I could tell some more dramatic stories of how karmic entanglements are expressed and interconnected in life. But some of my proteges I could actually support in their liberation, and they still live a life without drugs and in freedom. Those two dramatic stories are the basis on which the idea to build a place where I can give more support to my proteges is built. Together with my wife Kogyo and my Dharma sister Koryo, I founded the NGO Thousand Hands. We want to build a center with a housing community, and we are lucky that we found a donator who supports us. Right now, we are looking for a plot where we can realize this idea. This is not easy, but we are motivated, and if you want, I can tell you a bit more later, or you contact me if you like. So after telling you my personal stories, I would like to come back to more general observations about action, and especially about karma. In the old Indian philosophy, karma means movement of the being. It is the concept for the dynamic side of our being and means, in the broadest sense, the deed or act. There are again different kinds and groups. Even actions that we only think about already are karma and leave traces. They are eternal and cannot be erased and have a hidden line of development. The idea is that everything is stored in the alaya vijnana as seeds. This distinctions into good and evil always depends on the effect of an action, and this is determined by the inner impulse or motivation or intention that underlies this act, consciously or even unconsciously. Our kleshas are also responsible for evil. Therefore, these energies are also called evil impulses. To purify these energies is the goal of our practice, and thereby to awaken to the true reality, or to realize absolute truth. Thus, to realize this wisdom of the other shore, prajna paramita. This view of the world out of the absoluteness or suchness can also be called the transcendental view of the world. But as bodhisattvas, we are not dwelling on it, but acting out of this absolute view and thus improving our relative view. That is our task as bodhisattvas, acting out of the absolute and staying in the relative, using skillful means as demonstrated by Vimalakirti. That is what it meant when we say not one, not two, living in the midst of paradox. The basic Buddhist idea that our lives are eternal and that we can improve our karmic actions from life to life, thus breeding more and more good karma, can easily mislead us and leads to extreme misunderstandings in real Buddhist life. This is pushed to extremes in some sanghas. I know a community where there is a kind of indulgence trade, and you can buy graduate courses to learn how to transform bad karma easily. We humans love simplicity and quick solutions. But there is the idea in Yogacara that everything is just consciousness, and our so-called world arises only from consciousness. In our practice, we can purify it, transform it, and so awaken to the true reality. And this is the possibility of reducing our karmic evil deeds. This means, however, that we must observe everything closely and not be driven by rush intentions, which are again only delusions. But we always have to include this perspective out of the absoluteness, and this recognize the structure that have been built up by the karmic threads. For me, this also involves the structure of our real lives. How do power and influence develop our social life? Where are the origins and what is their true motivation? Our task as bodhisattvas is to look everywhere not just in the places we like, to investigate what we think is good and what we think is good for us. This is hard work, and however, it is good for nothing and leads us nowhere, and it is an impossible task for us bodhisattvas. But we don't give up. As Hojo-san keeps saying, we are only baby bodhisattvas and still need a lot of practice. Everything I said about relationship applies not only to sentient beings, but also to inanimate beings. All of our environment, the whole nature, should be treated like this, not only humans or animals. We must care for nature too. Not knowing is nearest becomes very important here, because we cannot understand karma logically, because cause and condition, as we see them, do not work logically. The invisible threads of relationships create effects whose influences cannot be predicted. When I get to know new protégés, the puzzles of their lives are assembling piece by piece. Over time, a picture and an understanding of it emerges, but not all pieces of the puzzle can be found. They are often hidden so deeply, and the influences work through generations. Be it from family history or the culture of the country, or from wherever. The gift to look into Alaya Vijnana is not given to me. I see my role as somebody who gives space for the relational threads to unfold. And sometimes the space becomes so big and can be transformed. I prefer giving space for the individual to unfold to giving advice out of my own opinion. So I'm more a space giver than an advice giver. This is one of the maxims of my pastoral work. Uchiyama Roshi said, a bodhisattva is an ordinary person who takes up a course on his or her life that moves in the direction of Buddha. You are a bodhisattva, I'm a bodhisattva. Thank you. So, if you have comments, questions, anything else, please.
Thank you very much. This was very moving. I was especially moved by the story of the young woman, because I could relate so much, because I had my own history of abandonment and betrayal and rape and things like that, and traumatic experiences. And we try to heal ourselves, kind of, and the way heal with others, and not trying to help, but getting help helps sometimes so much, because I think we cannot really teach something, we can only learn, and and find things that help, and sometimes it's what others found and tell that they sorry, I'm getting a little bit confused now, but to take it on another route, I know so many people with back pain, especially back pain in the Zen community, and perhaps we should...
I think everybody here experiences.
we could do a self-support back pain group. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I learned that this giving space is the most important thing what we can do or what we can offer. Yeah, not always being ourselves and our ideas, our concept, giving space for everyone. Yeah, and today my Austrian phone is directed to my wife, because I'm not in Austria, and it's a lot of money that somebody calls me in the US, so I have a US phone and Austrian phone. And today, somebody is calling for chaplaincy. And my wife, at 5 in the morning, talks 1 hour to a drunken old woman. She was so devastated, and only to listening was so helpful for her. And she is now again okay to go on rehab next week. So giving space and not only being always what we think we are. Yes.
Thank you. So much of what you said, I felt like lights going off inside of me, like yes, yes, yes. There's one aspect of what you were talking about that I don't fully understand. When you were talking about right service and being one-on-one rather than being a part of an ideology. How does that fit in with supporting an organization? For example, you know, you talk about a center or whatever that you are forming, and there may be others around you that see that they want to support your work. Or, I mean, there are thousands of examples of that, you know, if you are in contact with a group of people that are in dire need, and there is an organization that is helping those people, and you can become part of that organization. Does that go against what you were saying with the one-on-one only?
No.
Okay.
No. Thank you for this question, because I think this is very important. We have to distinguish, you know. There is our pastoral work where we have to give this space, and on the other side there is this organizational administrative side where we have to make decisions in the real world, yeah. And sure, we have to balance this, yeah. But these are two different things. Like I said, there is this absolute world and relative world, you know, and we have to act in both like it is needed, you know, and there are these both sides of the coin, yeah. So this relative side sometimes needs clear advices, yeah, clear decisions. They not be most of times not nice for somebody, yeah. But it is needed, yeah. And on the other side, there is this absolute open space for everybody, unlimited. So, and to get this balance is not easy as a association, yeah. But it needs a lot of communication, yeah, and a lot of coming together and talk about, yeah. And special ways to talk about. Also to find what I talked about these communicative methods. It's also, these are methods to come out of our self-centeredness, to come out in a space what is needed for the discussion right now. So for example, we use talking sticks. And we have different methods to find a way to grasp the ideas from others. For example, we have discussion groups with closed eyes. This is a wonderful experience to feel what the other said and not to see, yeah? And so these trainings are very, very important to communicate, yeah? And this is this relative side of being in the world, yeah? And the other side is our sitting practice, and this kind of losing ourselves and give this space to others. And this can be or is often very helpful. Not always. Yeah, because you cannot see the threads, you know. There are so many hidden things in lives over generations, you know, and especially wars. Yeah. Wars are, or the outcome of the wars are here over generations and generations, and now again so deeply in Europe, unbelievable, and all over the world, you know. Yeah, hope this is a little bit helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there are questions on Zoom.
Yes. Go ahead, Yael.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for all the wonderful talks. It's not a question really, mostly just to say that it's been just wonderful to be listening to you every Sunday for the last few months, and I'm sorry, you know, that this is the end for now.
Not so sorry.
But I expected you might say something like that, but
For sure.
luckily I'll be in Bloomington soon, so all the questions that I have, and there are many, I will be hopefully ask you in person if you will have some time.
I'm sure I will find, yeah.
Thank you, but really just incredible you know, work and so much detail. I felt that almost every talk can be turned into multiple talks.
Yes.
And so I'd love to, you know, hear more if there's an opportunity for that at some point. Just very inspiring, and today was just a beautiful way of tying some ideas and concepts with real life experience, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for this comment. Yes, I heard this a few times, that maybe I put in too much stuff in my lectures, but this is how lectures are working, in a way, yeah. And for sure, you know, this working on these lectures was a challenging time for sure, and it's now about half a year I work on this, yeah. But I learned so much, and you can be sure that I deepen this learning more and more, and you will hear maybe sometimes, yeah, more about this, yeah. It's not the end. And like you said the last month, I like to talk. Yeah, and I hope we see us maybe next week or the week after, yeah. And yeah, and I look forward to hear your concert, yeah. And the discussion, and yeah. Thank you.
So for the benefit of folks who might not know who that was, that's Yael Weiss, who was a world-renowned pianist, and also has precepts from Hojo-san. She's going to be presenting a concert conversation at our anniversary event week from, well, 23rd, 24th weekend. So yes, please look forward to seeing her.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
No questions from or comments from Vienna.
They're waiting for you to return. Then
Yes, for sure.
they're
Yeah.
saving them up for you.
Either that or you did such a thorough job, there are no more questions to be asked.